Hello and welcome back to Ronnie the Reader. We are back with another video here, my first video in a long time. Today's video is going to be about Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. We're doing a little bit of a spoiler-free review at the beginning here, and then we're going to do some spoiler-filled clips as I was reading this particular book, and you can see some of my spoiler thoughts with a lot of the plot details as they were playing out. So to start off, this particular book is following a man named Ethan Marsh. He is moving back into his childhood home after his parents have moved to a condo in Florida. Now, Ethan is a little apprehensive of moving back to his home because 30 years ago, when he was 10 years old, his neighbor and best friend, Billy, disappeared from his backyard. The two boys were camping in a tent out in Ethan's backyard, something they did every Friday for that particular summer. And Ethan wakes up one morning and he sees that there is a giant slash in the side of the tent and Billy is missing. Now, we pick up this particular story, like I said, about 30 years later when Ethan is returning to his hometown and this particular home where it happened, where his parents have stayed, and he starts just thinking about Billy and kind of trying to figure out what happened to him. So this book is a bit of like an investigation type book. Ethan really is trying to figure out the mystery of Billy's disappearance. He is not a police officer or anything like that. There is a police investigation that is ongoing about Billy's disappearance in this particular book, but you never get those particular perspectives or anything like that nature. The book is told in two timelines, as you probably can suspect. There is the 1994 timeline of that day that Billy did disappear, and then there is a present day timeline that's taking place in summer of 2024 that is following Ethan as he is looking into the disappearance of Billy and trying to figure out what happened. Now, ultimately, to give you my star rating up front, this was a 4-star rating for me. I did debate between a 3.5 and a 4-star, and without getting into the spoilers, which you can continue to watch, if you would like to see those spoilers. But ultimately, I found the book to be engaging and entertaining, but I never was super invested in the mystery of Billy and really figuring out what happened to him in a sense. The book is told in chronological order, which when I was reading the book, I kind of thought would be the case, but I actually thought that the book being told slightly out of order would have been maybe more interesting. Now, I don't know exactly how you would put that particular book together. I don't have like an exact answer to what would have been better, but I don't know, it just felt very beat by beat. There was never any shocking moments in this book. I was never shocked to find a reveal or anything. There were definitely surprising moments, some aspects that I didn't see coming, and normally for me, when I'm reading a mystery thriller, when I am just reading and letting the story wash over me and not kind of actively trying to guess of what's going to happen next, that tends to be when I have the most success. It tends to be when I'm actively thinking oh, it's probably going to be this, that I tend to rate a book a little bit lower. And while I wasn't exactly doing that in this particular book, I wasn't invested enough to kind of think about it. But then when it was happening, when the reveals were happening, or when there would be little mini plot twists throughout the book, there just was never that moment that really caught me off guard, or where I was oh, this is really taking the book in a completely different direction. And ultimately, I think that is why the book is slightly disappointing, is that there's nothing new or groundbreaking in this book. What it is a good, engaging story, and that's why it's 4 stars. But there wasn't anything that really just left you going, wow, that was really, really impressive how that particular mystery or that particular reveal was pulled off. The other part of the slightly lower rating was the ending. I wasn't a big fan of it. I did think it felt a little rushed, and there were some aspects to the ending that I just totally did not enjoy. And so that's ultimately why the book landed on the 4-star rating for me. I think that this is a perfectly good Riley Sager. At the end of the video, I will show you where it kind of stacks up in my ranking of Riley Sagers thus far as they've been published, and kind of how it correlates to that particular ranking and some of the themes that are explored. But some of those maybe will be a little bit spoilery, not outright spoilers, but some of the themes, if you've read other Riley Sagers, you can kind of guess where this particular book goes and kind of what is present. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Definitely recommend it. If you want to just kind of get what happens in this story, continue watching for the next 15 minutes or so throughout my spoiler clips, and then we will wrap up the end with, like I said, that kind of ranking of the Riley Sagers and a little bit talking about some of the themes that were present in this particular book. I'm now about 132 pages into Middle of the Night, and I definitely have some thoughts, being about, I don't know, I guess probably like a quarter of the way through. I actually don't really know how many pages the book is in total, but the book is following Ethan, who as a 10-year-old boy, his best friend Billy went missing from a tent in the middle of the night from his backyard. They were kind of doing like this camp out thing that they would do every weekend. And so Billy was taken, and it's now been 30 years since then. He's returning, and he's kind of living in his parents' house as they've now moved to Florida. And a lot of the people who live on the street are the same. And so he's kind of reconnecting with those people. And I would say my biggest kind of takeaway of this book so far is that it is just deeply sad. It's a really sad book. You're dealing with a lot of really sad topics. And kind of with that sad, I think a main topic of this book so far is grief and guilt. We have Ethan, who is dealing with the guilt of what happened to Billy. And now in the book, we have since found out that Billy is supposedly dead. His body has supposedly been recovered, just as Ethan has returned to this house. But you're also dealing with a couple of other characters who are dealing with grief and tragedy. The book is told in this really interesting way where you're getting normal chapters that are in present day, and they are told exclusively, at least so far, in Ethan's perspective. And then you also get these chapters that are not labeled as chapters. They have kind of a time, like a date and a time of that particular day when Billy went missing. And those chapters have been alternating in perspectives. So we've gotten one from Ethan. We've gotten one from his mother, who has a bit of these secrets going on. She seems to be... I think you're being led to think that she's having an affair with one of the neighbors. I think it's Fritz Van Dan Furs or something like that. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but they seem to be having something. You also have gotten a perspective from Russ, who is another young boy who lived on the street that Ethan and Billy hung out with. And his older brother Johnny has recently passed away in the kind of past timeline a year before. So that's taking place in 94. Russ's brother Johnny passed away in 93, and you're dealing with the grief and the fallout of that and how his family is dealing with that information. There's also a character named Ashley, who was Ethan's babysitter. She's about 6 years older than Ethan, and that summer when they went missing, she was his primary babysitter and knew a lot of the other kids. There was another kid who lived on the street named Rajesh, I believe is how you pronounce it. He's now a police officer, and in the kind of present timeline, he is sort of investigating. I don't think he's the lead investigator, but he is involved with the investigation of Billy's death. But in the past timeline, he apparently was kind of like the street bully. He really did not get along with Ethan and Billy is really being set up as being kind of a weird kid. He can't really make a lot of friends. He struggles really hard. I think Billy is definitely being coded as a child who maybe has autism, I think. Now, I don't know how I necessarily feel about that, and that is not explicitly stated on the page in any sort of way. But that is the vibe that I'm kind of getting when reading his chapters and listening to others' descriptions. And so it's not going to be easy because, especially in the 90s and all the way up until, I would say, the last 5 years or so, autism was really demonized and not understood as a disorder in children and, adults especially. It's really difficult. Overall, the book it has such a different feel than Riley Sager's other books, which I kind of was expecting. This seemed like a really kind of big departure, not necessarily in the overall premise, but in kind of our lead character being now a male, although, it's not being exclusively told from his point of view. But the book so far, while there's mysterious elements and there are mysteries being set up and things that you are wanting resolved, the larger, thing I'm getting from this book as I'm reading it in these first 100 or so pages It's just the immense difficulties and grief and sadness that people going through, and it's making for a difficult read at points. Like, I'm not flying through this necessarily. Like, it's been 2 days and I'm only 130 pages in, just because reading it does take a lot of you emotionally, or at least it has been for me. It's been definitely an emotional journey getting just this far. We're also dealing with Ashley in the present day, dealing with her father, who is most likely developing Alzheimer's and probably some form of dementia. And so that's really difficult to deal with and read about. And so it's just a lot of difficult topics that are being tackled that are not necessarily surrounded by the mystery. But then the central mystery itself is about a young boy who went missing, who is now being presented as having been murdered, which is really difficult to read about, a 10-year-old child being potentially abducted and murdered. Now, I am skeptical if that is actually the case of what did happen. I mean, I'm thinking maybe, like, I really don't know whether to believe that or not. And part of me doesn't know how I feel about that, because I think it would be really cheap to potentially not do that. Like, regardless, there was a juvenile body found in this book, which is difficult. Whether it is Billy or not, who's to say at this point? Yeah, I don't know. I have heard a little bit about this book since it's been released, and seeing some TikToks that people, not that they weren't a fan, but this wasn't what they were expecting, and maybe it let them down a little bit in their expectations. So I don't think this is going to be some kind of shocking plot twist heavy book. Obviously, you're going to find out kind of what happened to Billy, and there are some other secrets, like this group of characters. So Billy, Russ, Ethan, Ashley, and Rajesh all went to this place called the Hotline Institute, which is this kind of shrouded in mystery, like, research institute that's about 2 miles away from the neighborhood that they live in, that's separated by the woods that are behind their house. And that is actually where Billy's body was found, was on the grounds in this lake at the Hawthorne Institute. And in the 1994 timeline, it's been alluded to that the kids snuck on and something happened, like some sort of thing happened to Billy. It sounds like they left him there, and he was really upset. And there was this really heartbreaking line of Ethan kind of remembering the memory, and how there was a point where Billy was yelling, like, "Please don't leave me, Ethan, please don't leave me," which is really, really sad. Like, thinking as a 10-year-old just being left, like, it's just really difficult. It's sad, and there's a lot of sadness. Yeah, I'm liking this so far. Riley Sager is a good writer. I like the way he writes his books. And I am interested to see how the mystery goes. So I think at this point, I probably will check back in at, like, maybe about page 250, which would probably give me about another 100 pages till the end, and kind of see where we're at. So yeah, I'll get the rest of the way through that and give you an update then, and seeing how I'm still feeling at that particular mark in the book.
Look at these adorable kitty cats. They are so sleepy. There's Lynx and Anza. Both of them so sleepy.
At this point in the story, there has been a lot that has happened. Like, there have definitely been developments, and we've kind of learned about the characters more, and we've gotten to dive a little bit deeper into the actual mystery that is the book. But I can't say that I have been, like, jaw dropped at any point in this book. It's engaging. It's an engaging story. The characters are engaging. But as far as the actual mysterious elements, like, they just, not that they're falling flat, but it's just, there's nothing been shocking at this point in the story. We now have kind of had the flashback of the afternoon of kind of like the event that caused Billy and Ethan to drift apart that day before Billy disappeared. Turns out they, snuck off to the Hawthorne Institute grounds, which we've heard about. They decided to go inside this mausoleum that was on the ground. Like, Rajesh basically dared them to go inside this mausoleum, and then he locked them inside, and then the latch got stuck, and the 3 boys, Russ, Ethan, and Billy, were stuck inside. Russ and Ethan were able to slip out through the bars, but Billy got stuck, and then basically he got left behind in that. And that's kind of been, I would say, not the biggest piece of plot, because we have found some kind of or gotten some more major reveals in the fact that Ethan's mother, Joyce, her job, which I don't know if I mentioned in the first part, but Up to this point, part of her backstory is that she was working and she was fired from the job. The job turns out to be at the Hawthorne Institute. She was working as a like secretary or assistant there. And the neighbor from across the street, the Fritz von de Veer guy, was also like a high-ranking up official in that institution. And Ethan basically has confronted him in the present day timeline about Billy's murder, and kind of what the Hawthorne Institute is. Turns out they were doing more like paranormal, parapsychology experiments and things there. And also, Johnny, who was Russ's older brother who passed away, was really into the Institute, him and Rajesh, which I guess I missed, but I guess Rajesh is the same age, or maybe like a year younger or so than Johnny and Ashley, who were the same age. But anyway, Rajesh and Johnny were like best friends, I guess. And it turns out actually that they may have been secretly gay. Johnny kisses Rajesh in the 1993 timeline, and Rajesh doesn't handle it well, but we do find out in present day that he is now out and gay and is married to a man. So just another kind of tragic story, you know, it's the barrier gaze trope kind of thing, just another tragic aspect to this story in this book. So Johnny really gets into the Institute and he's doing more stuff. I think there's probably more to that than meets the eye, and I think that will be something that we do explore in the last little, you know, quarter or so of the book left. And I think that's kind of it as far as the big plot points. We do have Ashley's father in the present day. This happened, I think, like right before I updated you last time, but essentially Ethan found him in Ethan's backyard. And he was saying, like, did you see him? He, like, ran right through here. And Ethan assumes that he's talking about Billy, but I don't know. I think he's probably talking about someone else. Obviously, the things left to still uncover are who took Billy. At this point in the 1994 timeline, we are with Billy as he is talking to Fritz in the Hawthorne Institute, and we know that he's going to have a conversation with Ezra Hawthorne, who is the one who is the head and runs the Hawthorne Institute. At 1994 point in time, Ezra is like 92, I think, 94. He dies in 1998, so about 4 years after Billy disappears, and he was like almost 100. So yeah, he's like in his 90s or whatever, but him and Billy are about to have a conversation, supposedly, according to Fritz. But yeah, we're still don't know who took Billy, how Billy died. It has been revealed that he had fractures to his skull and his ribs were broken, and that his body was wrapped in a blanket. Once again, I'm still skeptical whether it is actually Billy. There have been a lot of like paranormal aspects to this book, but it's felt very normal, and Riley Sager has done like paranormal, supernatural aspects before in other books. This one just feels a lot more normal and less present in the story, but I'm just so intrigued to see like how the book is going to end, and like what is the answer to some of the remaining mysteries. I know I have, about 100 or so pages left, and I think at this point that the book is probably a 4-star rating. I think it doesn't feel like a 5-star. It doesn't feel like some of the other really, really great Riley Sagers that I love. It's still engaging, it's still mysterious, and it's entertaining as you're reading it. So that's kind of it. I don't really have that much else to say, other than just kind of those updates on where we're at in the plot. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this maybe tonight, and then update you after I finish it and I kind of have some final thoughts, and then we'll jump back to my kind of wrap up review, and yeah, we'll go from there. So I'll see you in a bit. All right, hello. Sorry for maybe a little bit of a jump scare. I'm in the bathroom, just got home from my second job, just got out of the shower, so just doing a little bit of a kind of nighttime routine-ish stuff here, but let me back this camera up a little bit. Is that better? I finished the book. I finished the middle of the night earlier today. It's the same day as when I gave my last update, so I did the last 110 pages earlier before I had to go to work. Ultimately, the book for me was, I think, a 4. I'm debating going as low as a 3.5 even. And mainly the reason I'm debating that is because I just was not a huge fan of the ending. So getting into ending spoilers here. So the ending, turns out Billy was killed. So it turns out Russ slashed the hole in the tent just to like be a demon and be annoying. Should I be a beauty guru? CeraVe face moisturizer. Russ slashed the hole in the tent and is the one who kind of did it to scare Billy and Ethan and to get back at Ethan because he is Russ the entire time in the childhood phase in the 94 timeline has been mad that like Ethan and Billy are best friends and he like feels left out and he's feeling like depressed because of Johnny's death, which really had nothing, that was not brought up again, like it had nothing to do with anything through the rest of the story. And so that was like great, I guess. But Billy, so he slashed, I'm getting so off topic. So Rush slashed the hole in the tent. Turns out that Billy just left through the tent because he was mad about the fight that he had with Ethan in the tent. And then Ashley was driving home drunk from a party that had been like alluded to throughout the entire time. And turns out she hit and killed Billy. And then she wrapped his body up, threw him into the freaking waterfall lake area at the Hawthorne Institute, and just went about his business, or her business. Had Henry, her child, which I don't know if I've even mentioned thus far. But yeah, Ashley has a kid now. And then the ending of the book is that Ethan has adopted Henry, and Henry is now calling him dad. It's been a year and a half at the end of the book. Ashley's in jail. Russ moved away. Everyone's moved away from Hemlock Grove. Also a reveal, which I hadn't talked about, but I kind of was thinking was the case, is that Ethan's wife, Claudia, in like the present day timeline is already dead. You're kind of led and it's alluded that they're just divorcing and they're separated, but it was pretty obvious that she was dead. And their whole thing was like that they didn't want to have kids, and then Claudia was like, I want to have a kid. They have a fight about it. She goes out and she ultimately dies from an aneurysm, ultimately, which is really sad. Again, with the sadness and the grief. And that's kind of why I suspected that Claudia was dead, because it would go really well with just like the themes of the book overall. That is kind of how it ended. I just didn't like that ending, specifically the Ashley part of her being the one to hit and kill Billy. And I'm not saying that I had a better ending in mind. One thing about this book, and I've kind of talked about this a lot when I've reviewed mystery thrillers, is that if I am not like kind of planning out in my head and thinking what's going to happen, I'm just letting the story happen, it tends to be a higher rating. For this one, I just was like, I don't really know. Like, not that, I don't know how to describe it. I didn't ultimately, at least I didn't think I ultimately cared what was the ending. I just wanted to know what it was. And I think I actually was wrong about that, because when I found out the ending and I found out it was Ashley, I didn't like that. I wasn't a fan of that. And so yeah, it's really difficult to kind of parse out my feelings. Ultimately, it's somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. So regardless, on Goodreads, I probably will just round it up to a 4. But for my own personal, reading spreadsheet and the way that I'm tracking books, I'm debating between a 3.5 and a 4. I'll take the day to think about it, think how I feel, kind of figure it out, get all of that situated and ready to go. But yeah, that's kind of it. I think those are the last couple of things that were kind of like revealed in the last 110 pages or so. Nothing too big. I will say it was thrilling. It was definitely action-packed. Oh, something that was kind of random is that after they found out that Russ was the one who slashed the hole in the tent, they go over and Ethan like confronts him and he's like arrested. And then they come back to the backyard and there's this whole tent set up because Ethan was trying to like recreate the night to like relive his memories essentially. And he sees that Henry was like kidnapped by someone, and it turns out to be Billy's younger brother, Andy, who like, I kind of just was like not dealt with. He like fully kidnapped this child and was like holding a child over the edge of like this waterfall, like ready to like drop him. And then it's just kind of like at the end, like I saw Andy twice more after that. Once when we had like a real funeral for Billy, and then again when we buried his mom who died 6 months later. And he got off on kidnapping from a lesser charge because of Detective Palmer, who I don't think I've also mentioned is kind of like the lead detective that's been working the Billy case since the body was found. What? Like, what? And then the whole time jump, like I said, to the 1.5 years later when Henry is like living with Ethan and calling him dad. Like, it's just weird. It's just weird. It was a weird way to end the book. There is like alludingness that ghosts and everything like do happen. It is alluded that Billy is the one who saves Ethan and Henry at the end because they ultimately do fall over the cliff down the falls and into the water. And it's like alluded that Billy like pulls them out. So fine, you know, so there's like light supernatural elements, very much kind of similar vibes to Home Before Dark. At the end, I'm gonna kind of sit on it, come back with like a ending review, hopefully I've had, and that'll be the wrap up. So thank you for watching this vlog portion and the spoilers. Ultimately, I think this part, I didn't have too much to say because they're just, not that there wasn't a lot going on, I just didn't have a lot of thoughts about them, which I think is indicative of the ending rating. So yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out when I decide to ultimately settle on as a rating. Alright, so welcome back to the ending here. If you've gotten through my spoiler thoughts, I finished the book last night, so it's about 24 hours after I finished it now, and I did settle on that 4-star rating. It ultimately was just good. It was just good. I had some issues with some of the reveals and just a little bit of the pacing, I guess, of the book would be the best way to describe it. But it was entertaining and I'm happy I read it. I, like I said, really enjoyed the cover. I think it is a really pretty cover. Not that that has anything to do with the contents or what's inside the book, but I did enjoy the book. Ultimately, I still am a fan of Riley Sager. I still will be reading the rest of his books. But this particular one just left me wanting a little bit more. And I have seen that thought or, you know, that feeling around this book in other places like TikTok, like Instagram. So, you know, it's definitely not just me that is feeling this way or that was maybe left wanting a little bit more from this book, which is disappointing. But, you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. I did want to get into where this ranks in my Riley Sager rankings as far as where all of his books stack up against each other. So this is the current Riley Sager ranking for me. So you can see down here, Middle of the Night ranks sort of at the bottom. We have The Last Time I Lied, Lock Every Door, The Only One Left, Survive the Night, Final Girls, Home Before Dark, Middle of the Night, and of course The House Across the Lake, my never-ending friend of Riley Sager's books. So one of the reasons I talked about earlier in the clip of kind of doing this ranking at the end and maybe skipping it if it could be slightly spoilery is because these bottom 3 ranked books here, more than any other of Riley Sager's books, actively deal more with supernatural elements and the supernatural world, the paranormal world, spirits, ghosts, those sort of things. That is really what Middle of the Night is very focused on. And there are aspects of that both in Home Before Dark and in The House Across the Lake. This is way more supernatural explicitly than any of the other ones. And Home Before Dark, I think, has fallen a little bit. I just think ultimately when I'm looking at what I enjoy and what I like, I don't think I'm just a fan of supernatural elements in mystery thrillers, in horror. It just never does it for me. I don't necessarily care about ghosts or anything because it always ends up being slightly disappointing. It's never what I'm wanting or what I'm hoping for. And so, you know, that is a little sad because that is an interesting story technique and storytelling, but it just doesn't work for me. And it's interesting that the times that Riley Sager has tried to pull that off most explicitly have not worked for me. The time it was most successful was Lock Every Door and The Only One Left, which sort of have that spooky-ish element, but I would say that those books are much more gothic than paranormal or supernatural, which I think I definitely enjoy more. I'm more of a gothic reader. I enjoy those gothic elements and kind of being like in an old house. I definitely enjoy the suburban aspects of Middle of the Night. I enjoy like a suburban thriller. Such a Quiet Place, actually, is the one that I'm thinking of. Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda is like a suburban thriller that I actually really enjoyed. And so I think it's one of those things where I enjoy more of like the whole street necessarily being involved. Whereas in the Middle of the Night, it was more just kind of Ethan himself investigating and the other characters were suspects or players in it, but it wasn't something that was encompassing the whole street or the whole neighborhood. So those are my wrapped up ending thoughts on Middle of the Night and how they, you know, compare to some of the other Riley Sagers that I've read. So definitely let me know what you thought of this book, if you're planning on reading it, or if you've just watched some of the spoilers to know what happened in this particular book. I would love to know all of your thoughts and feelings down below. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and I promise to try to be more active in the summer. I definitely am getting a lot better with kind of feelings of depression and sadness and being able to get out of bed and being able to read. So hopefully I can post more in the summer. I can't promise that I'm going to be super consistent right off the bat, but I'm definitely going to try. So thank you once again for watching this video, and I will talk to you soon in another one.